Hey there, welcome back. This is Dawn Thompson with my amazing co-host Nicole Harlot, and today we have, I think, will be a very fascinating conversation about. I'm just going to let Ashley tell us, but Ashley Mariani is here joining us, and if you could just introduce yourself, Ashley, and just tell people what you love to talk about.
Yes. So my name is Ashley Mariani. I am a registered social worker. I work primarily with couples and women, and I'm also a breathwork facilitator, and most recently a metaphysical reverend, which I'm excited about. I work with couples who are struggling with intimacy, especially after birth trauma or big life transitions. My approach to therapy is real and direct and grounded in nervous system work. A big part of my work is also helping men step into their mature masculine identity and supporting women in reclaiming their feminine energy. And that challenges a lot of mainstream narratives around relationships and birth and wellness. And when I'm not wearing my professional hat or leading workshops, I'm raising my 3 kids, doing movement of some capacity, and loving my family deeper and better every chance I can.
I love that. Well, you and I had a really fascinating conversation, and I think maybe I'll just start there because I think it's a good launching off part. I've always identified, or not always, but I guess as I grew into an adult, I really identified as being a feminist, right? And being, I can do whatever I want to do. I am power, I am all those things. And recognizing that really stemmed from probably trauma in my childhood, right? That made me feel like I don't need anybody, right? My dad, my biological father was mostly absent and, yada, 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 right? So many things. But also, I do believe that I'm a badass and I don't necessarily need someone to do the thing. What's so interesting is I had been in other relationships prior to meeting my husband. And the thing that after 23 years of being married to him, I recognize is that he was the first man that made me feel safe. He's the first man that made me feel protected. And I was able to dip into my most feminine space and be vulnerable. And I felt like he has been such an incredible partner, like as a parent, like he is a co-partner at its best. And because he was that guy, I was able to be my best and my most gentle and like, there's this saying that like the tougher the woman, the more she needs to be
Baby.
supported, right? Babied. I hate that word, but I don't like it. But you're right. I mean, and I just would have never thought it until it just evolved, right? I mean, I had to experience it to really get it and understand it. And so I realize that's my own personal story and it's not in the context of pregnancy and postpartum. But let me tell you something. When we got married, we both had 2 kids each. Neither of us were interested at that point in having more children. The more I trusted him and loved him and believed in him, I wanted to have his children. Right. It made me want to have more children. And we did. And now we have 6 kids, which is like everybody looks at us like we're bonkers, when I say we have 6 kids, but it was because of his energy and how he supported me. So I think that is a great leadway into this discussion of, how important it is for that masculine role for us as women.
Well, I want to add too, and Ashley, I'm sure you can talk from an expert perspective, but just from my own personal experience, kind of piggybacking off of that, Dawn, and I think it's probably more common than we realize, especially in today's society with, women having to, be income providers as well, and additionally to moms and, all the hats that we wear. But I grew up very similarly, like, seeing my mom and dad divorcing at, kind of a prime age to where I was like, I'm gonna be an independent woman. No one's gonna have to provide for me. I went through college not worried about when I was gonna get married and have kids. Like my dorm mates would be like, oh, I want to have kids by 25. And I'm like, what are you doing here? You're 21, 22 years old. Like, I want to focus on my career. I want to do this. I was climbing a corporate ladder. Spoiler alert, I met my husband 6 months after I graduated college. We got married 3 months later. I was still in that like very masculine role in many aspects of our relationship. And then I became a mom. And then I had postpartum OCD and anxiety, and I dipped into my feminine. I was the one that needed to be supported. I was the one that was having, all of these issues, and he really stepped up. And that was a true turning point because after my second son, I got pregnant in 2019 with my second son, and then COVID obviously happened, and things shifted, yes, in the world, but like in our world, very drastically during that pregnancy. So it kind of aligned, but didn't. And the pendulum just swung. That's when I founded Moonlight. That's when I really got into like my womb space, my intuition, started embodying all of my feminine. And then our relationship went into a totally new level, a whole new dynamic. And I was, had a theory of 2 kids and done for a very, very long time. And now we have 4. And those last 2 were such impactful experiences for our relationship, for me as a woman, like stepping into that feminine role. My first 2 boys taught me that. So very similar, Dawn, as you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like my
Yeah.
story. So even though this isn't necessarily like how to, support a person in labor or, how to breastfeed like topic, I think it's really important in the perinatal space because like you said, women are most vulnerable and most transformative during this perinatal period.
Yeah. Well, we should probably let our guest talk.
Yeah.
We're like 7 minutes in and she hasn't even said a word.
Part of your story is exactly this. The village, the people in your village all have their own stories and all have a collective understanding of what it means to be in your shoes in some capacity.
Yeah, so let's dive in though to like what you know about this stuff and what your practice is. And like, I don't think I feel like I actually was very enlightened by our conversation when we did our pre-interview. So, let's dive into some of that.
Yeah. So I preface my conversations always around this by saying this is not how many therapists, mental health professionals, couples therapists, perinatal professionals think. I can confidently say I came to understand polarity, as we refer to it, after working with couples for over 10 years. And this doesn't just come through in heterosexual relationships, it comes through in same-sex relationships as well. It's a little bit more intentional when you're working on polarity in same-sex relationships, but the majority of my couples are heterosexual couples. And so being able to step back and say, there is a theme here, like what is going on? What is happening? And the introduction to this, before I even had discourse or language to identify what was happening, was an Instagram post I did on very long time ago about boss babes and how women who identified as being boss babes were actually women who wanted sexual partners to dominate them. And why? Why is this happening? And the conversation that I introduced was around decision fatigue and having a spiraling mind and wanting someone to just make the decision and do the thing without them as the woman having to lead and decide and plan and do the thing, right?
How many of us are shaking our heads right now? How many? I bet you if you're driving in your car and you're listening to this, your head is bobbing up and down right now. Yeah.
And this post would have come out around the same time that 50 Shades would have been very popular in pop culture. And now we're seeing this rise of romantasy novels, right? This conversation around book boyfriends on TikTok and on Instagram, where these male characters within these erotic type novels are men who are leading and decision making, who are emotionally attuned, who can offer safe space to listen to a woman's emotions. Totally okay. Pause.
Sorry. Yeah. My phone is never on, but there it was. I don't know how that happened. Anyways, go ahead.
They're male characters who can hold space, who can who don't take things personally. So there's become this pop culture obsession with these types of fantastical novels, and for a reason, because women are, it's escapism for women. If I can't have this in my real life, I'm going to dive into it through escapism, through my fantasy books. But what it tells us is that women really want this. They want to have this space where their opinions and their points of view are respected and listened to, but perhaps even at sometimes challenged a little bit, but ultimately not the expectation that they navigate, lead, guide the family into health and well-being while their partner is along for the ride, essentially. So when it comes to even the birth space, I would say there has been a lot of conversation about, again, a word I'm not super thrilled by is empowered, right? So when I hear a professional say, I'm empowering women, I have to stop for a second because this applies that the professional holds the power and they are giving it to the woman instead of allowing a woman to see her power and not putting the professional in the gatekeeping role of owning the power and passing it. So a lot of birth professionals have got into this habit of how do we empower women to make decisions in the birth space? To be quite honest, when they're in the birth space, women shouldn't be making any decisions. They should just be listening to their body and dropping into exactly what's happening. And the person making the decisions needs to be their partner, needs to be essentially the security guard, the bodyguard, standing in reality, whatever you want to call reality, but standing in the physical dimension, protecting her energy so that she has the right and the ability to drop into her space and birth her baby the way she needs to birth her baby.
Right. The thing that irks me the most is that we need a security guard. I want anybody who's listening to this understand that, like that phrase right now, that birth in the hospital requires a bodyguard. And gosh, that sounds so extreme, but it's absolutely true. And
I
I
mean,
know
even
after
even
23 years.
midwives here. I know midwives in Canada operate differently than midwives in the United States. In Canada, we don't have private pay midwives. They're all government.
System.
Yeah, it's all part of the system. So it's much different. So here, even if you are having a home birth and there's a midwife in attendance, there still is very much a component of having to listen to what's being said in the other room to see if there's a secondary plot that you're not privy to or intentions, which feels really icky.
It's so
But
unfortunate.
it's 100% unfortunate. What has evolved from that is this need for a combination of partner advocacy and the role of doula
Yeah.
or birth keeper or birth attendant. And so it's becoming very powerful. And the more partners we can give the information to, and the more partners who are addressing their shadow work. And when I say shadow work, it's why can't you stand up to authority? What makes you recoil when a physician or a midwife or a nurse says, we're not going to let you do that? What makes you as a man pull back and say, okay, let's just do what they've asked, because you have to address that shit before you ever enter a birth space.
Yeah. So for the PRC, we just had a symposium on Friday, and we had two of our panelists who coined themselves as dad doulas. So they're men who experienced their own, partner's births and said, hey, something's got to change here, and spoke very similarly. Like, I am the bodyguard. I'm protecting my partner so she can do what she needs to do. She's here to birth, and that's it. And I don't care if I'm called unruly or, direct or whatever, but I'm making sure that her plans that we discussed before walking into this room are adhered to, or at least if there's a true emergency, all the information is on the table. And I mean, this gentleman is 6'3", very large. I mean, it's
Did you say it's called God doula?
dad doula. I
I
saw your
thought you said
face
it was
when I
called
said
God
it.
Doula, and I'm like,
No, 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 no. No,
I'm
no.
sorry.
I wouldn't play that game. No,
Yeah,
Dad
I'm
Doula.
like, that would be a really unfortunate name.
So what he does is he supports the fathers, and he's BIPOC, so mostly BIPOC men that, we know that those women are more
High risk.
apt to have trauma or mortality in the birthing space. So, but he makes sure that the man in the relationship or that masculine non-birthing person is educated, is understanding of what is going on, is supported to step into his masculine role. And it's just really cool to see. It actually hyped me up because there were two of them on that
Nice.
call, and I was like, this is what we need. Because of course I'm such an advocate for doulas and like actual professionals. And when I first talked to him, I was like, so you're not trying to like doula the mom, right? Like, we don't need that cross contamination. He's like, no, no, no. Doula for the mom, me for the dad. We're all a team. He's all about alignment of roles, and it makes so much sense because realistically, like, my husband was amazing during all of my births. My first hospital birth, though, he did nothing, and I loved it because I had doulas there, right? So he was able to just hold me and be in the space and like be there and present without having to like make those decisions, or, luckily I didn't have any major decisions to be made, but he was able to back off. And then by the time my third and fourth babies, he knew his place, right? He knew, what things were helpful, what weren't, where to step in, where not to. But like most partners, and I'm generalizing here, most partners probably wouldn't be as involved as he was because they're a lot like they're just a passive person essentially. I feel like they're not focused on as much. They don't understand their role until it's too late to have had one, if that makes
Well, I
sense.
think too, it's that women don't even understand what the role should
Well,
be,
right. Yeah.
especially on their first baby, right? And I mean, I think that's the benefit of having a conversation like this is hopefully there's a bunch of first-time moms listening to this, and they're like, oh, I need to get my husband involved here.
Yeah. Beyond just
How do
going
you
to like the
see,
ultrasound appointments.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Ashley, how do you see this, you know, formulate in couples that you're working with that are pregnant? How do you help the dad get into that space or understand that that is such a critical role?
Well, it still is an interesting dynamic because I still don't think it's my role, like we're talking about. If my hope is that men are stepping into their mature masculine energy, I honestly don't want them coming to a woman to take the advice of how they need to be men. Like that still isn't the best outcome. The best outcome is a brotherhood hierarchy of life experience where there is an elder and a wisdom keeper and somebody that can teach the younger generations this information and not having to come to me. Ideally, I attempt to refer men to male therapists because if a man is coming to me for life advice, they're missing the point.
Mm.
Forming those relationships with men in their community that they aspire to be like. But unfortunately, the downside is that my field of work in particular, again, does not prescribe to this concept of what it means to be a mature masculine man. And so these male clients are kind of left like fish out of water, unsure where to go, and just coming to me because I'm the only one having this conversation and identifying these dynamics. So I would love to have more male therapists in my field that I can refer people to and know and trust that they're in good hands and that they're not going to be swayed to think differently or not going to be pressured into taking a more submissive role in the birth space dynamic. That just doesn't exist. But when I do have couples come to me, we really do have to start with, like I said, the shadow work, the dealing with the what's your relationship like with authority? How do you feel about the medical professionals? And do you feel like are you the expert of your body, or do you put that expertise into the hands of somebody that's met you for 15 minutes? What does it feel like to challenge authority? What happened for you growing up when you had a difference of opinion with your parents or your teachers or the authority figures in your life? How did you handle that? How did they handle that? So we have to iron out all of those corners. And then we get into, okay, we live in Ontario, Canada. My clients do. What are the rights here? What rights does the love of your life have in birthing your child? Where can the hospital staff say, oh, get out of here, you need to leave? Under what are the terms where that is expected? And where they can actually follow through with it, and where are they just hoping that you cower and listen to their rules, so to speak. So let's figure out what are your rights, so that when a nurse or a physician or even a midwife comes in and says, is our policy to X, Y, and Z, you can turn around and say, unfortunately, under bill, blah, 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 act, blah, 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 I'm allowed to be here and I'm allowed to say this.
Right.
And when you use the legal terms in the space that they're using policy, you're going to win every time.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not your woman's ideal space, or it's not her job. It should not be even anything she has to listen to, because that
Right.
will be a distraction. That will put her nervous system in a state of sympathetic arousal. And that is not the environment that a baby comes earthside in.
Right. Well, and it will often stall labor and prevent dilation and, all these things. It's like, I love actually in Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, she talks a lot about that, about the psychology piece that I think that we miss entirely so often, that if women are afraid or, nervous or frightened, like all the things, all the negative emotions, that baby's not coming out. And we wonder why we have failure triggers all the time, and it's like, it's because we're not creating that safe environment for women to feel totally safe. And like, I hate the idea that even the dad would need to be, or the partner would need to be, knowing the law in order to say, no, I understand that's your policy. One of the things that I do a lot with my clients too is I talk about language and how your language absolutely matters when you're in labor. I see it all the time. Sometimes the most badass women will go in there in labor and they'll start asking for permission for everything. Like, can I go to the bathroom?
I do this for a living. My first birth and my twins' birth, I was the most vocal. I involved perinatal lawyers to educate myself. And still, I found myself in that hospital cowering because a nurse didn't let me eat the ramen noodles out of my ramen soup. I had a moment where I said to myself, what? Who are you? I don't even know who you are. You're not, you are scared to eat the noodles in your ramen soup because the nurse said you weren't allowed. And in that moment, I was like, I know I don't feel safe. I know this is my fawning. I know that I just want these babies here, and I'm gonna have to clean up the mess of this afterwards.
I think it's so, language is everything. And it's amazing how often we give away our power to other people in these situations, like you said. And, I see it all the time with families who are being encouraged to induce labor, even though they don't want to. Right? Or maybe they're like, I'm not sure. Like, oh gosh, they're saying my baby's going to be big, or they say my baby's too small, or they say if you go past 40 weeks, your baby's, could die. And the risk of fetal demise doubles, and it's like, I think that fear of losing the baby drives everything. And women will just sacrifice their bodies in that moment to do whatever the medical provider says, because what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong and that provider is right and I lose my baby? I would die. I would never forgive myself. And that goes the same for the male partner, I think too. It's like, that's the problem, is we don't have the medical degree, like as if, that's a whole nother subject, obviously, but I get it all the time on my TikTok videos and all this, like, are you a doctor? Are you a nurse? Well, then shut up,
But
And
there's
it's like,
something
like as if,
experience.
23 years of bedside support, you don't learn a thing or two, or that you haven't been able to educate yourself in a pretty extensive way with research, law, all these things. But anyways, it's just it's hard to see. I just experienced it with a client this week, and I did everything I could to encourage and coach her through the process of feeling safe and declining the induction. But she just was like, I can't live with myself if something happens. And they're right. And of course, birth ended in cesarean, and baby was normal size, even though they were convincing them that it was IUGR, and and it's maddening. It's really maddening to not have a medical degree. So then, even though you know all of this stuff and you can present them with all of this information, all of this research that shows how off these things are, and blah blah blah, but the doctor's like, well, let's just do it to be safe. How do you combat that?
Let's just not
Whether
do
it's
it to be
you
safe.
or your partner, how do you combat that feeling?
I mean, it's also radical responsibility, right? Like at the end of the day, if a poor outcome happens and you or your partner are the only ones to be essentially responsible for the outcome, that's terrifying in a world where we don't ask people to take accountability for anything anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Everything gets defaulted. And so if something goes wrong in the hospital capacity, the parents can at least rest on the fact that it wasn't their fault. Something bad happened to my baby. It was not my fault. I did not make that decision. The decision was in the hands of the experts and the professionals. And therefore, the outcome that took place was not because I am a bad person or a bad parent or Y and Z. And so it is absolutely terrifying for people to say, if something bad happens as a result of the choices I'm making in birth, I am the one who has to own those choices, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life, and I can't do that. So I will defer that power elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think then that's exactly why we're in the place that we're in with providers too. Why they're behaving the way that they're behaving is because it's their responsibility now, right? And so so they're like, no, I don't feel comfortable with you doing a VBAC after 2 cesareans, because if something happens, you're going to come back and sue me. And so I am just covering my ass all the time. And like, it's and like, listen, I feel empathy. I didn't used to, but I have come to understand it in a much better way, that this is why the system is exactly the way it is because we as consumers are failing to take responsibility for ourselves, for our decisions, because it's easier. It's easier to just be like, no, they know. And like literally check out of your own intuition. Like, what does your intuition say about this? Are you scared that your baby's going to be massive? Do you feel like your baby's going to maybe have something happen? Do you feel that way? Or do you feel like, no, I feel like everything's fine, right? Like you hear women do that and partners do that. Like it feels like everything's fine, but what if? And we're damaging millions of people for the small risk.
I think it really, like, where the power stems from or needs to stem from is that choosing the provider, right? I see so many posts on like mom groups like, hi guys, I'm pregnant. Tell me about the providers at this hospital or this or that. And I want to tell every single one of them, like, it's not up to other people. Like, you need to interview a few. You don't need to just pick one. Interview a few. Pick one that you're comfortable with, that listens to you. And again, I know, Ashley, you're in Canada, so it's different here, but like home birth midwives here are so different than, I'm generalizing again, but like for the most part, than the in-hospital midwives and OBs, right? I would almost equate in-hospital midwives and OBs more in one bucket, and then home birth totally different,
sure.
right? My home birth midwife, she was for my last 2 births, she never did an internal exam, but what we did every appointment was talk to me. How am I feeling? What are my goals? Like talked about my plan. Just felt like she was a friend. Like I felt safe with her, right? My first birth was with a, typical OB office where I had to see all the doctors just in case whoever was on call with my birth. And I like maybe got to know them for 2 minutes of the 15-minute, small talk before they checked my cervix and did whatever they had to do. And, it's such a different system, but that's where it starts. It doesn't start in the birth room, right? Like it starts in your pregnancy. So I think I wrote a post or a blog or something like the intangible benefits of home birth that you don't realize, like have nothing to do with actual birth, but more like the prenatal and the postpartum. Because even, that 6-week visit here in the United States, that infamous 6 weeks, well, my midwife saw me 24 hours, 48 hours, 1 week, 2 week, and then the 6 week. There was 5 touch points before then. And if I needed her at any point before, she would have came. And it's all in home.
Yeah.
So my point here is like, it might be really hard to establish that, that feeling and that intuition in the birth room. It's too late. Like you need to do it beforehand. And when you're in your like logical, conscious thinking brain and not in your reptilian subconscious, I'm giving birth and I'm in labor brain. And that is also when you can have your partner with you and explain to them what's going on and how you feel in this moment. And I'll even extend this to like pediatricians with your children and, making choices with them. You can listen to your intuition. Just because your doctor says something doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing. I think I've explained this before with my second born. Something told me at 5 weeks, like, just stop vaccinating. And I was, a normal vaxxer. I don't know if that's even a word, but like, with my first son, he was on schedule, whatever. And something in my gut just told me to stop. It wasn't a bad reaction. It was just a really confirming knowing of stop. And at 15 months, we found out he was allergic to eggs. And 3 of those vaccines on schedule would have had egg proteins in them. So like, I had no idea for a year why I meant to stop, and that was just like, I had validation a year later of why I got that knowing. But I think women, and this circles back to, I think a lot of the modalities that you use, Ashley, is like, we're not connected to our bodies. We're not connected to our intuition. We're not taught that. We're conditioned to be men and not women. And if we could just tap into our feminine energy and understand that intuitive nature that we have, it would make birth such an easier feat.
And often when I talk about this too, people become very hyper fixated on, okay, what do I have to be doing to be more feminine? What do I have to be doing to be more masculine? And it's not about perfection. It's not about black and white. It's not about, I know the word polarity means exact opposites, but it's not about doing it perfectly. It's about understanding, okay, I've been with this person for X amount of years already. I need to give them grace. I need to give myself grace. I'm learning about this. Maybe they're learning about this. How is this going to benefit their life? How is it going to benefit my life? How is it going to benefit our children's lives? And how can we make this concept work within the life that we already have? And many times a great place for women to start, if they want to inspire a leadership capacity in their partner, is to pull back on the criticism and pull back on the white knuckling and pull back on the dictating what needs to be done and allowing their partner to suffer the consequences of not following through with the outcomes, right? A great example I normally give is loading the dishwasher. For some reason, it's always a thing. So when you go to your partner and you say, you didn't load the dishwasher the way I asked you to load the dishwasher. This is how we load it. Why don't you ever load it the way I say? This is useless. This makes my life harder. Instead of being able to say, listen, I'm noticing that we load the dishwasher differently. I don't know if you have a method to your madness, but I'm going to let you in on why I load the dishwasher the way I do. The reason why I load the dishwasher this way is because the cupboard for our cups is on the right side of the dishwasher. So I put the cups on the right side of the dishwasher. The drawer for our silverware is on the left side. So I always put the basket on the left side. So the reason why I'm doing it is to save myself time because I value my time. And I'm letting you know that when you load the dishwasher your way, and I'm expected to unload it, it feels like you don't value my time. So if you're going to load the dishwasher your way, moving forward, you will be the one to unload it. And now they understand that you're not just asking me to load the dishwasher the way you want to because you're being controlling and you want to have power and it's your way or no way. No, no, no. This is about, I have a million things in my day. The last thing I want to do is think about unloading the dishwasher. But if I'm gonna do it and I can cut out 5 minutes of loading time, at least I know you thought about me when you did such a mundane task as load the dishwasher. Dawn's muted.
Oh, you're muted now.
The gardeners decided to show up. So I don't think you guys can hear it, but it's still annoying to me. But anyways, I think there's a lot of people who are like, again, bobbing their heads on that one. And even me, I feel like I'm also, both Nicole and I are both Virgos. So it means we're very particular anyways. And I don't always like that. I'm very efficient, right? It's just the way I work. It's like I'm always looking for the most efficient way to get something done. And when someone is doing something in a non-efficient way, it drives me bonkers. And I'm not always great about saying like why I'm trying, like, what did you do? Why are you doing it like that? And it doesn't always elicit the best response from my spouse when I do that. And sometimes he'll just be like, let me do it the way I want to do it. Like, stop, go away, like I'll do it, kind of thing. And so I hear that like from a relationship standpoint. What does that look like though in birth, I wonder? It's like, how does that translate in birth or postpartum or pregnancy?
I think it looks a little bit different because we're talking about an experience that will never be embodied the same way by either partner. So ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever decisions the mother makes about her birth and her body is hers. If there's a conversation about how boundaries will be set with providers, I think that's kind of where it will look like, listen, you don't have to tell me word for word what I'm going to say to this doctor if he walks or she walks into the room and this is said to me. I don't want you to give me a script. I understand why you want this, and I need you to trust me that when I say I will not let this happen to you, I won't let it happen to you. But I don't want you micromanaging what I say to ensure your safety. And that's when women have to say, truly look at their partner and say, I trust you to make the best decision for our family. And if you can't say that to your partner, if you struggle with that being your truth, I can't trust you to make the best decision for our family, then that person cannot be in your birth space.
Damn. Like, that was a big one. So this immediately, though, and I know, Nicole, you're probably thinking the same thing maybe, is the amount of folks that we hear that say, I really want a home birth, but my partner isn't on board for it, and maybe we'll do it with the next one, or whatever, that frequently pregnant folks will be, they won't do what they want to do, and instead cower even to their partner.
Yeah, that drives me up a wall. Even like a close friend who's in like this birth world professionally, she is newly pregnant, and I was like, oh, are you gonna, like, now that you have all this information, are you gonna have a home birth or a birth center? And she's like, I don't know, my husband doesn't feel comfortable. And I was like, stop it right there.
Well, to be quite honest with you, I have seen this multiple times, and at least 50% of the time, the woman is using that as a cop-out. Because just like the sitcom narrative that we see oftentimes the other way around, like, I can't, my wife won't let me, sorry, can't stay out at night, my wife won't let me. And instead of a man saying, no, that's not what I want to do, and that's not how I'm going to spend my time, so I'm going to bow out, no thank you. I have seen multiple times women say, I don't think my husband's comfortable with it because they don't want to take accountability for their choices.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I've definitely seen it though, where the woman is talking to her husband about it too, though, and being like, I really want to do this. And he's just like, absolutely not. I don't want to. I don't want to do that. I don't want it to be in our house. I don't want the mess. I don't want, like the list of reasons is, the length of my arm. So, It's
Navigating
still,
that is much different because in that moment, there are two choices. There's probably more than two choices, but the first two choices are I'm going to do it with or without you. And if I have to do it without you, that is going to put a huge rupture in our relationship. Or I'm not going to do it because you don't want me to do it. And then I will hold resentment towards you for the rest of our relationship until something changes. So it's
especially if
almost
it goes bad, right? Especially if the birth, if they get all of the interventions and they're, all the things. And I mean, I have seen many relationships be demolished because of birth and how they're, I mean, we saw it all the time through Improving Birth when we did our campaign about, break the silence about obstetric violence several years ago. Gosh, probably 10 years ago now. Anyways, and it went viral. And, before going viral was a thing, and it was amazing. But the hardest thing was how many people we heard over and over again that their relationship was never the same again because their partner didn't step up in those moments to protect their wife, and how they just never forgave them, and they never looked at them the same way again.
So that is the reason I created the course that I created. It's a self-paced course for dads in particular, because when I pulled back the layers of relationship conflict and resentment, and the number one reason why there wasn't sex in the relationship, I found that the story was too similar across the board. And it looked like I can't look at him the same way because when I was lying there in that hospital bed and was having X, Y, and Z done to me without my consent. Well, he knew that's not what I wanted. Well, my voice was stuck and no one was listening to me. And he stared at me and he just let it happen. And my heart wants to forgive him, but my brain now associates him with the perpetrators of that action, and I can never allow him close to my body again.
Yep. I mean, and it goes back to how I felt like when at the beginning of this thing of like, it was the first time in my life that I felt safe, and it allowed me to become a different person, right? It allowed me to be my best person, right? And so it goes back to that whole thing. It's like, if you don't feel safe, it's so interesting. Like, especially, I think people underestimate that need in labor. I think it is the crux of so many issues.
And women are taught to unlearn what you talked about, intuition and bodily cues. And so many women dissociate from their body because even down to how a care provider changes a little girl's bum when she has a diaper on, if it's forceful, if it's hard, if there's an association between aggression and her vulva or her genital area, even as young as a newborn, then she is going to learn to dissociate from her body in some way, shape, or form. And so we are now entering this world where we are asking women to drop into their bodies and pay attention to what their bodies are telling them from days old. They are remembering, their body is remembering some kind of aggression or disconnect or harsh energy associated with their genital area in particular. And so it becomes different when we talk about bowel movements. If I say to a client, can you poop in public? No, I could never. I can never poop. Can you poop with your husband beside you? Some women will say, oh yeah, no problem. I have no problem doing that. Great. Those people are probably going to have a better chance at dropping into their body and surrendering with their husband present. The people that are like, oh no, nope. Even young children, especially little girls, if they are attempting to have a bowel movement and they think they're in trouble or there's something scary happening, their sphincter law kicks in, everything closes. Your anus is a sphincter. Yep. Everything closes. Now they're constipated for weeks at a time because there was an incident that happened that made them feel unsafe.
Man.
So even being able to ask a woman about her early toileting experiences from what she can pull from her family is going to have an impact on how she births her baby.
God, it gave me goosebumps actually.
I know. Oh my gosh, me too.
That was a lot.
I think that was a great point to kind of stop at Not that I want to stop. I feel like I can have this conversation for another hour. So maybe we'll have to do a part two of this for like postpartum healing and things like that, postpartum sex, and rekindling that relationship after birth. But
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Ashley. These have been really enlightening points, and I think just it speaks volumes to our societies. And I love that you're in Canada because it's not just, a lot of the times we were like, oh, it's just the United States and everyone else does it better. But like clearly, that's not necessarily the case. And yeah, so there is one last question that we typically ask all of our guests. So speaking of the village, besides your role as a couples therapist, who would you say is the most valuable person for a woman to have in her village?
I mean, my intuition automatically did go to professionals where I'm thinking like, okay, a naturopath is important, a pelvic floor therapist is important, postpartum doula, super important. But I think the most important role is someone who represents wisdom keeping or elderhood, a woman or multiple women who essentially hold the deepest lived experience and can serve that mother as a guide, as a protector, as a storyteller for the community at whole.
I love
Somebody that would be aligned to your value system. Obviously, there's going to be a different elder or different wisdom keeper per village, but this is essentially going to tap into someone who can provide guidance for mothers, emotional regulation. We still want that in the cronehood, we still want that concept of leadership within the archetype dynamic anyways. So even though we don't want the masculine, we don't want many women embodying too much masculine energy and not being able to lean into their feminine, there's still this dynamic of elder wisdom and leadership. So when you're building your community, removing yourself from thinking about you need to have other women who are in the thick of it like you are and thinking more about the spectrum of women that you can involve in your village that are the maidens who have the time and the energy and the ability and the freedom to support you in particular ways, and the crones who have the wisdom, the education, the lived experience that can support you in different ways.
I love that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ashley, thanks so much. This is such a fascinating conversation. I think, of course, it's like one of those episodes we could go on for a long time just talking about all the different, aspects of the psychology, I think, essentially to all of this, right? But I hope that our listeners really appreciated it. And I have a feeling we'll have you back on again another time so we can dive deeper. Be so awesome. Anyways, thank you all for tuning in, and don't forget to come back for our next episode, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.